My son grinned at me the way you'd grin at a stray dog you were about to kick into the rain. "You're getting zero, Dad," he whispered, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Not a dime. Go back to your rental." He was right about the rental. He was right that on paper I was just the broke ex-husband. He was wrong about who was actually in charge. Because when the lawyer read the next line, my son's smile vanished faster than his credit score. "My name is Thomas Blackwood. I'm 68 years old. And this is the story of how I taught my ungrateful son that the man who builds the bridge is the only one who knows how to blow it up." The rain at the cemetery was cold, but not as cold as the look Brandon gave me when I tried to reach the casket. "Front rows for family, Thomas," he said. He hadn't called me Dad in 5 years, not since he decided a retired engineer in a small apartment didn't fit his image as a rising marketing executive. He pointed me toward the back, past the business partners, past the people who only knew Catherine for her money. "Try not to embarrass us. Tiffany's live streaming." I looked at my daughter-in-law. She was posing at the open grave, checking her angles, perfecting her waterproof mascara. I didn't argue. I walked to the back and stood under an oak tree, watching them bury the woman I'd loved for 40 years. Catherine and I divorced 10 years earlier, not because we stopped loving each other, but because it was strategic, a way to shield her assets from a lawsuit threatening to sink her empire. We stayed apart on paper. In truth, she came to my apartment every Sunday for coffee. Every major decision, she ran by me first. Brandon never knew that. He only saw a mother worth millions and a father driving a 10-year-old truck. As the crowd thinned, Tiffany marched over, heels sinking into the wet grass, and shoved a cream envelope into my chest. Inside was an eviction notice. "Vacate within 72 hours. Brandon stood beside her, smirking. "The apartment belongs to the estate now, Dad. As sole heir, I'm liquidating it. 3 days. Tiffany laughed. "We can flip it for 500 grand. "That's business, Tom. That's why you're the poor one." Brandon squeezed my shoulder. "Not affection, just wait. Don't bother coming to the will reading tomorrow. It'll just embarrass you." Then they climbed into his leased Porsche and splashed mud on my shoes. I stood alone by Catherine's headstone, pulled out my cracked old phone, and called a number I knew by heart. "Mr. Prescott." They made their move. A low chuckle answered. "Classic, Brandon. Green for tomorrow?" "We're green," I said. "Initiate phase 1. And Arthur, make the room cold. I want them uncomfortable." The next morning I walked into Prescott & Associates in my 15-year-old suit, deliberately shabby, exactly what they expected. The receptionist almost turned me away. Inside the conference room, Brandon sipped scotch at 10 a.m. while Tiffany scrolled her phone, feet up on a chair. "Jesus, do you have no dignity?" Brandon muttered when I sat in a folding chair by the door. Prescott began. The estate totaled $28 million. The mansion, the Aspen house, the car collection, the liquid assets. Brandon whistled, clinking his glass. "To my ex-husband Thomas Blackwood, I leave nothing," Prescott read. Brandon slammed the table. "Zero, it's in writing," Tiffany cackled. Then Prescott turned the page. "However, all assets shall be transferred into the Catherine Blackwood Protective Trust." Brandon's smugness cracked. "What trust?" "The beneficiary," Prescott explained, "was Brandon, but a beneficiary with no direct access. No selling, no withdrawing, no leveraging. Only what the trustee chose to release." "Who's the trustee?" Brandon demanded. Prescott closed the binder, pointed toward the back of the room. "Thomas Blackwood." Silence swallowed the room. Brandon turned slowly, like solving an equation in a foreign language. "Him? The guy who clips coupons?" I stood, buttoned my old jacket properly, and walked to the head of the table. I opened the file to the liabilities tab, my reading glasses, not the cheap ones I wore around them. Brandon owed $2 million to a Vegas casino and $800,000 to a Chicago lending group known for breaking kneecaps. Tiffany had 5 maxed cards and a forged second mortgage on her parents' house, a felony. "As trustee," I said, "I have a fiduciary duty to protect this estate. Paying gambling debts and handbags isn't prudent investment. Request denied." Brandon lunged at me. 2 security men I'd hired that morning intercepted him before he crossed the table. "You brought security to a will reading?" he gasped. "I learned from the best," I said. You evicted me at a funeral. Then I turned the tables completely. Since they'd evicted me from my apartment, I informed them I'd be changing the locks on the mansion, the one they'd been squatting in rent-free for 6 months. Rent is $2,000 a month, payable to the trust, I said, tossing their own eviction notice back at them. Don't be late. For 3 days I watched from a hotel room as my son unraveled. Tiffany went live, crying to her followers that I was a monster who'd stolen their inheritance. Donations poured in. Then came the real attack. Brandon filed to have me declared mentally incompetent, backed by a bought doctor's affidavit. I hadn't seen a physician in 2 years. I couldn't let it stall in court for months, so I went to the mansion myself. Inside, Brandon was running an illegal estate sale. Strangers, walking off with Catherine's crystal. A stolen Paris landscape changing hands for cash. I called the police. They were escorted off the property, not yet arrested, but shaken. Alone in the house, I found Catherine's old desk with its false bottom drawer. I'd built it myself 20 years earlier. Inside was a letter. Tom, if you're reading this, Brandon has done exactly what we feared. I paid his debts twice, and he never learned. You were always the strong one. Don't give him the money. Not until he's broken. Break him, so we can build him back up. Love, Kat. I wasn't the villain. I was her last gift to our son. Then my phone rang. A blocked number. A gravelly voice. The Chicago lenders. Brandon owed them $800,000, and now they wanted it from me, with threats about accidents and old men falling downstairs. I refused to touch trust money to pay them. Instead, I met them at a steakhouse and bought the debt outright for $600,000 of my own savings. Brandon no longer owed the mob. He owed me. I watched through the mansion's cameras as reality set in. The century-old boiler I'd let go unmaintained left them freezing. The pipes spat rust-brown water. An $85,000 property tax bill arrived. The exemption Catherine had used was voided the moment beneficiaries occupied the house. They couldn't sell so much as a spoon. Every item was cataloged trust property, and touching it meant theft charges. Desperate, Brandon called a loan shark for $50,000 in emergency cash, pledging the house's contents as collateral he didn't own. I bought that debt too, through a shell company called Ironwood Financial, then sent him a text. First payment of $15,000 due in 48 hours. By nightfall, I owned every debt my son had ever created. Cornered, they went further. I overheard Brandon and Tiffany plotting through my own surveillance. A bought doctor named Eris would file a fake diagnosis, paranoid schizophrenia, early dementia, and have me forcibly committed, clearing the way for them to seize guardianship of the trust. I let it happen. I texted a man I trusted simply as Davis. Be ready. That night the knock came. Police, paramedics, Dr. Eris waving a fabricated file, Brandon sobbing crocodile tears, Tiffany screaming that I had a gun. I let them strap me to a gurney. As they wheeled me out, Brandon leaned close. You won't remember any of this in the morning. Goodbye, Dad. 2 blocks later, the siren cut off. Davis, my man, planted as a paramedic, pulled off his mask and unlocked my restraints. Camera on his uniform had captured everything. Eris's false claims, Tiffany's lie about the gun, Brandon's whispered threat. We weren't headed to any clinic. We were headed to a safe house where Prescott waited with a notary. Aris, drugged with his own sedative by Davis's cousin driving the ambulance, would wake up at a police precinct with a confession ready to sign. Brandon, believing me locked away and sedated, grew careless. He scheduled an illegal auction of the estate's antiques for the very next night. I went, masked, blending into a crowd of vultures in tuxedos and gowns. Brandon stood on a platform in my old tuxedo, auctioning off Catherine's belongings, including The Solitude, a painting she'd specifically willed to the National Gallery as a protected cultural asset. Selling it wasn't just theft, it was a federal crime. Bidding reached $600,000. I raised my hand. $1 million. The room went silent. The gavel fell. Sold. To the masked man in black. I climbed the stage, pulled off my mask, and watched my son's face collapse. Dad, he choked. Dr. Eris is in federal custody, I told him. And in about 30 seconds, you will be too. The windows shattered. Flashbangs. FBI agents flooded the ballroom. Prescott had alerted the Federal Art Theft Task Force. Guests scattered, dropping stolen goods as they fled. Brandon grabbed my arm, panicked, reaching into his pocket. I didn't know what for and didn't care. Agents tackled him to the floor I'd installed 20 years earlier. Tiffany, dripping in Catherine's jewelry, was cuffed, trying to slip out a side door. "You planned this," Brandon screamed as they dragged him out. "I didn't set you up, son," I said. "I just let you be yourself." I thought it was over. It wasn't. A text from Tiffany, sent moments before her phone was confiscated. "Check the safe in the master bedroom. Brandon sold the one thing you actually care about." I ran upstairs. The safe was empty. Catherine's journals, our old letters, gone. Sold for cash I'd never recover. I'd won the war. But standing over that empty steel box, I understood there are no winners between a father and son, only survivors. 3 days later, out on bail with ankle monitors, the collapse I'd been waiting for finally came. Tiffany called me, her voice stripped of its usual performance. "I can give you Brandon," she whispered. "We met at a diner on the edge of town." Stripped of her diamonds, she looked ordinary, frightened. "I didn't know about the forgery," she lied smoothly. "I can testify. I know where he hid cash. The offshore accounts. Just get me a plea deal, and 50,000 to start over." I let her talk. I recorded every word. Then I stood, dropped a 5 on the table, and told her the truth. We'd never had a deal. Only a conversation. One I intended to share with the only person who needed to hear it. I sent the recording straight to Brandon. "She values you at 50,000, son." His reply came in seconds, a string of curses, then, "She's dead to me." The alliance that had once conspired against me was now tearing itself apart, exactly as I'd engineered. I sent the audio to Prescott too, with instructions to forward it to the district attorney. Solicitation of a bribe, enough to kill any plea deal Tiffany might chase, and guarantee her own prison time. I thought the story was finished. It wasn't. The next call from Prescott stopped me cold. Brandon had gone back to Tiffany's motel room and beaten her half to death. Broken jaw, fractured ribs, critical condition. Police had issued an alert, armed and dangerous, last seen fleeing. "He isn't running," I told Prescott, setting down my pen. "He has no money, no passport, no one left. He thinks I'm the reason his life collapsed. He's not running from me. He's coming for me." I didn't call for police protection. I didn't leave the city. I checked the deadbolt on my hotel door, pushed a chair against it, and waited. Because I'd built this trap one beam at a time, and I intended to be standing when the last piece fell into place. Whatever Brandon brought through that door, he was walking into a foundation I'd poured myself, on ground I controlled completely. He had spent his whole life believing money was the answer. Now he had none. No wife, no freedom coming, and nothing left to lose, which made him dangerous, but not unpredictable. Not to the man who'd raised him, not to the man who'd been 3 steps ahead since the moment they handed me that eviction notice in the rain. I sat in the dark, listened to the city hum outside the window, and thought of Catherine's letter one last time. "Break him so we can build him back up." I didn't know yet if there'd be anything left of my son to rebuild, but I knew this. Whatever walked through that door next, I would meet it standing. The way I'd met every collapsing structure in 40 years of building things meant to hold. Some things you reinforce, some things you have to let fall all the way to the ground before anything honest can be built again. The bridge was down. Now we'd see what either of us had left to build from the wreckage.